Gary is talking with Christopher Hines, better known as Coach Chris. He's the host of Creators Getting Paid and one of the top podcasting coaches in the business. This podcast is made by marketing entrepreneurs for marketing entrepreneurs. If you love creating something out of nothing and are hopelessly addicted to growth, you're one of us. Stop by each week to hear conversations with leading marketing entrepreneurs where we drill down on things like how to start and double your business, develop systems that can scale, and why success starts with who you are as a person. And after the episode, head over to the Agency Growth Engine server on Discord to talk shop and swap stories with the rest of our community. Let's dive in.
All right, we are live. I'm here with Chris, and I'm really excited to have him on today. But before we jump into the conversation, I want to make sure that you do something for me. If you can, if you're listening on Spotify, go up there and hit the little green check for me. It really, really helps us out. Everything here is free today, and I know you're tuning me out right now when I say this, so please don't make me beg. Just go tap it. It takes you 3 seconds, and I'd really, really appreciate it. So, Chris, I'm really excited to have you on. I was listening to your content yesterday, and I want to describe your business, and I want you to tell me how spot on I am, how off I am, in what areas I might have missed. So you help podcasters monetize their shows, no matter how big their audiences are.
Exactly. And this kind of started for me 7 years ago in 2015. Before podcasting was mainstream, I was able to launch a show and get sponsored on like my third week. Like it happened like that. And that's when I realized that, okay, this is possible. So I spent about 3 or 4 years working with podcasters one-on-one. Like 2 years, I just did free coaching. Like you just schedule a time on my calendar. So I work with podcasters on getting paid, no matter what your audience size is, because the truth is it doesn't matter how many people follow you or subscribe to you. All that matters is you can solve a problem. If you can do that, you can make money.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that you're kind of approaching it from a different angle, because everybody else is like, hey, I'll help you get more views, or hey, I'll get you more reviews, or I'll get you, just more interaction around your podcast, and you're approaching it from the other side of the coin. Why? And I haven't seen. There might be other people out there approaching it that way. I haven't seen them. Why do you think that is? Why do you think everybody's approaching it from one side of the coin and you're coming from a totally different angle?
Because it's funny. I tried it that way for about 2 years. So in 2019, I started that. Like, I'll help you grow your show, and we're going to work on your marketing, and let's get you more listeners and grow your subscribers. And I realized that people really don't care. That's just the truth. They don't. Yeah. They don't care. They don't care how many listeners they have. They care about how much money they make. Now, what's funny is the people that work with me on monetizing, they automatically come right back for a personalized marketing plan. Because after you figure out how much money you can make, then you care about your listeners, because now you're like, well, I can make this much money, but I got to get these listeners that are going to help me make more money. So it seems backwards, but I just went in order of the priorities of my audience. Yeah. After talking to them, I've worked with thousands of podcasters. I'm literally going to PodFest tomorrow to speak a couple times during the weekend. Yeah, so it's like I've talked to thousands and thousands of podcasters over the past almost 10 years now. So I learned that people care more about the money, and then they care about the other stuff.
Yeah. So what's your topic that you're hitting on at the festival?
So I'll be talking about the business of podcasting. So how companies can use podcasts to generate leads and sell their products, because that's one of the main ways to monetize. I created something called the podcast monetization pyramid, which is basically different tiers of podcasters. And the businesses are at the top simply because when you sell a product or provide a service, if you can get 10 people to listen and one of them buys in that week and your product is $1,000, you made $1,000. Yeah. Whereas the people who don't have a product or service yet that are kind of at the bottom in the beginning stages, they have to be an affiliate where they work with companies, they sell other people's stuff and they get a percentage. So
most of our listeners here are going to be marketing agencies, and I really look at you as a top of funnel marketing tool, right? And I've heard you talk about this as like, podcasting is just another tool in your belt, right? It's just another pillar in your strategy, just like sending emails is another tool, right? And so podcasting, I feel like for me, this might be the wrong mindset, so I'd love your feedback on this. So when I started my podcast, it was a different podcast. It wasn't the one we're on right now. It's called Dental Marketing Theory. And what I do is I bring on industry experts in the dental industry, because we do dental marketing, and we talk to them about what they do and how they do it. And really how I looked at it at first, I was just like, this is just going to allow me to make connections with people. And that I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea. I've never done a podcast before. I was like, I try to listen to other shows, but I was listening to the wrong people and building after the wrong kind of people. So it didn't like get a ton of views. It did pretty well in the dental space, right? Because it's so niche, and the people would share it. So those people I'd bring them on, they'd share it. So now I'm in front of their audience. I now have that connection with them. And it worked really well for that. And so it was really high a funnel. Like, that's how I looked at it. It's like at the very, very tippy top of the funnel. And then it's building credibility and trust, because it's like, oh, this guy has a podcast. It takes a lot of work to build a podcast, right? Usually scammers are not that patient, right? And not willing to put that much work in. So it really builds a lot of authority. So what did I do right there? What did I do wrong? Or what would you say, hey, maybe think about tackling it a little bit differently?
I would honestly say that's a great approach. I know a guy who does this, and he interviews marketing agency owners and has them on the show to talk about their strategies and their processes and stuff. And he helps those marketing agency owners get clients. And it's the perfect funnel for your business. If you interview your ideal clients, you're not only creating content to answer questions that your audience has, but you're also, like you said, making that connection. So that's one of the ways a business can use podcasting to be really profitable. So interviewing people is a great way to do it. And he even created this unique system, and it's a way you can get that guest after the show to schedule a call with you to talk about the actual business. It could seem pretty scammy, honestly, unless you let them know what it is before.
Yeah, what you're doing, yeah.
Yeah, so making them aware of it before it even starts, that's like a foolproof way to protect yourself as a content creator. So you didn't really do much wrong there. I think that's smart. And being niche down for stuff like that is actually the only way you'll be successful. When people try this strategy with coaching or with just business owners, it's not going to work because that's not specific enough. You got to be dialed in. It has to be nailed down for it to really work. I actually think there are a ton of markets that should really apply this, and man, it could be extremely profitable right now.
Yeah, that's what I always tell people. I have a lot of agencies. So this podcast that we're on right now, the Gary Bird podcast, this is for marketing agencies, but I'm not really doing it from a technical standpoint. I think there's tons of people out there that technically help you know how to run SEO or how to generate more leads and how to do all those kind of things. I'm more focused on the business side of like, how do you actually scale your company? How do you manage your people? How do you build infrastructure? And so we're building masterminds around that. We have a community on Discord with about 400, 500 people in it. And so and it's all free. Right now, everything's free. This podcast is free. I'm learning how to help other marketers from a business standpoint, where I think there's a big void in the space right now. And so what are your thoughts on like how I should position this podcast? This is going to be probably episode 2 or 3. So what are your thoughts on who my target audience is, and then how I position with marketing agencies or marketing experts like yourself? How do you think I should tackle that?
I think the interviews is a great approach, because when you talk to somebody, and that can be 2 ways, right? It could be you interviewing people you've already worked with that you already helped to boost your credibility even more on that podcast, right? So that's a area of content that you always have available is people that you've helped. Then you had the other side where you interview people that they want to learn from you. They have questions for you. So you bring them on your show, and you have a back and forth conversation, and a true conversation where you're asking them about their problems and what they're facing, but they can also ask you questions as well. And this is really unique, and most people don't do this. But the reason why this is so good is because it turns it from kind of a separated interview where you're here and they're here. It's more of a balanced conversation, which is what people love. You look at Joe Rogan's podcast, it's so successful because we see him as a guy that's up here that knows everybody, that knows a lot. And his guests are the same way. He has the celebrities or athletes on that know a lot of people and they know a lot of information, and they just have a conversation. Yeah. I think when we try to make podcasting too scripted and technical, it takes away from the value of the content. When you narrow things down and it's just a basic conversation between 2 people, that's when it's good, especially if you're talking about something like marketing. Yeah. You ask them questions, they ask you questions, and it is just recorded. That is probably the best kind of content out there when it sounds like a
You're just having a
conversation
conversation, yeah.
and not an interview.
Yeah, I love that. So, okay, so I haven't talked about this one. So we're starting a third podcast that actually we're going to start recording it in about 2 weeks. And what it's called is called the 8-Figure Agency Show. So you just kind of gave me confirmation that we're doing this right. And here's the setup. I'm not bringing on guests. There's a young man that reached out to me a while ago, and he's like, hey, I'm starting my agency. I'm doing well, but I need help. He's 18 years old, and he's way ahead of where he should be at 18 years old. And so he's having to learn a lot of things that usually you don't learn until you're in your 20s or 30s even. And so he was just like, man, what if we did a podcast together? And you being an 8-figure agency, right? You guys are going to do 20 million this year. I'm going to do this much. I'll bring all my problems, and then you help me walk through those problems. It'll be great content, and then I'll get time with you. And I was like, bro, if you edit it and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, absolutely. And that's what he does. They do video editing. So I think I said, okay, let's do this for a while. Let's see how it goes. But I really agree with you. I think that's going to be like, everybody I've told the idea to, they're like, that's really cool. Because I don't think other people are doing that, to your point. And so how do you, if you were a marketing agency, right? So how would you approach starting a podcast for your marketing agency? Assuming that you're not you, right? You're the podcast marketing guy. So assuming you're not you, say you generate leads for chiropractors, or you make videos for people, or you're a video editor. How would you tackle that? How would you use podcasting for something like that?
I love doing these examples because I think it's the best way to explain something to people. So if I work with chiropractors, I think what I would do is I will have guests on my show. I would have guests on that are, well known in that industry. People that I would literally go to Amazon and find people that are putting out books on this topic. Who's putting out a book in the next 6 months? Have my assistant go and contact all of those people. And that's like 50 interviews.
The chiropractors themselves that would be potential clients, or people who are experts in that industry on other subjects?
People that are around the industry as well, because I think it's unique because we should always go for the person specifically that we want to work with. That's not always the best person to talk to, right? Like if I wanted to train an NBA player, I wouldn't go directly to that player all the time. I would go to somebody else that he works with,
his
somebody else
coach,
that he knows.
his strength coach.
Yeah. And then you kind of can work towards that relationship through other people. So that's one thing I would do. Another thing I would do is, like we talked about with the organic conversation, I would bring on chiropractors from my local area, right? I would try to get some video content in person where it's literally just a 20 to 30 minute conversation about their business and how things are going and what's going on.
Why would you do that? What would be the benefit of that? Is that obviously it's not just for the client opportunity. What's the upsell from there?
Because there it's really about having organic conversations, and I think that's part of how you connect with your audience. All of your content cannot be to sell something, because then you just kind of wear your audience out. It gets boring.
So I'm going to touch on this really quick, and we'll definitely keep diving down this road. But I'm 100% with you. Like I don't sell on anything. Like dental marketing theory, I don't even talk about my company. And the interesting thing about it, we don't even talk about marketing. So I've had people go, dental marketing theory, I bring on people who are like, cool, you have like 60 locations, you've built up your dental enterprise. They don't need me as a client. Like they wouldn't hire me as an expert, right? Like they already have built their internal team, but I'm sitting here and I'm asking him questions about his business, and it draws in a lot of other listeners who are interested in the industry that are potential clients. So now I have potential clients listening, and they look at this guy and they go, man, this guy that I'm interviewing is a genius, business genius, and Gary's talking with them. So there's almost like some social credit that's passed back and forth there. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 1000%. And what's funny is I've had people reach out to me and invite me places to speak and invite me on their podcasts just because of who I interview. On a lot of my shows right now, I have the Business of Podcasting, which is my main show, but the Personal Branding Playbook is my oldest show. I've had that for about 6 years now. And I've done hundreds of episodes with people that are way smarter than me, way richer than me. And I love it because I'm always learning something. And that connection goes a really long way. And I get a lot of opportunities as well, simply from talking to that person. So that's the kind of content that you have to mix into a show about. I think the show that's niche down. And another strategy that I think maybe 95% of podcasters don't take advantage of is covering trending topics, which is literally finding trends that are happening in the world and making it fit your narrative for your show.
Like, so like, are you talking like Will Smith just slapped somebody type content? Or are you talking about like, hey, in the industry, like SEO, Google just updated their algorithm, so I want to talk about that? Or are you talking about both?
Really, it should be both, honestly. Because what that kind of content does is, if you're a chiropractor and you talked about the potential of Chris Rock hurting his back when he was slapped by Will Smith, like just think about how funny that would be if that's a 1 minute clip somebody's. So that's how the trending topics really work. It doesn't always have to be exactly into your industry. But then it's also being smart enough to know the content you should stay away from. Because there's some subjects you never want to talk about. Personally, I never talk about politics. Ever. It's just a rule I have.
It's just divisive. If I wanted to talk about politics, I would actually go and start a politics show and get all the views, right? And like and monetize it.
But I don't care for it. So I think you have to find that fine line between the trending topics that you can cover that fit your narrative and your brand, and then also knowing what to stay away from, because that can be dangerous for your brand as well.
So if you were a marketing agency and you're driving leads for chiropractors, number one, you'd bring in industry experts. Number two, you'd bring in some local people to get some in-person content to kind of build up credibility, build those relationship points with people in the chiropractic community. Not necessarily that you're going to sell them as clients. But then number three, you would work in trending topics, whether it's industry or socially tied in, and then you would tie that back into, like, the recession would be a good one to talk about, right? Like I just did a podcast around what's going to happen to the dental industry when the recession hits, and people who normally wouldn't listen to my podcast were all of a sudden saying, I'm going to listen to this one, right? Like, because now they're interested in the recession talk, right? So you never know who's going to be drawn in by that. Anything else that you would do outside of that if you were going to start a podcast?
I think those three types of content work very well, but then the last one you need is solo content. And I would say solo content is only relevant if you have the intention of teaching your audience something. And if you're helping these people get leads for their business, I think solo content can be valuable for them, because it could be a 5-minute episode where you give them one tip on how they can get more clients.
So does that need to be so the way I always think of that, and I might be thinking about it the wrong way, I always think of like, okay, my podcast is up. It's usually 40 minutes to an hour, and everybody knows it's posted every Tuesday, and it's kind of the same format. And then if I want to do like an educational piece, I'll drop that on like Instagram or YouTube as not a podcast, but like a video, but it's just me sitting there and it's very intentional that I'm teaching something. Is that the right way to do it? Or do you recommend dropping that as a podcast or having a separate cutout? What's your thoughts on that?
I think that content does good in video format as well, but definitely putting it on a podcast too, because what you'll find is that 5-minute episode could be how you get somebody to listen to your show. Because some people may look at your show and say, man, every episode is too long, I'm not going to listen to that. But then they see one that's 5 minutes and they're like, let me check this out. They listen to it and they love it. It's like with YouTube videos. If every video is 20 minutes or longer.
Yeah, that's why they do clips.
Yeah, exactly. So with the podcast, we should be doing the same thing, where we have our interview and our long form content, but then have the short form as well, because there could be somebody that only tunes into that. And after 2 or 3 times of them hearing the short episodes, they become a client. That's literally happened to me. So I'm always a fan of balancing out the content types.
Got it. Okay, so now let's walk through this. Okay, so now I got dental marketing theory. It gets 100, 200 downloads per episode. And then we break it up into clips and post it across social media. So it gets another couple hundred there. So we're probably getting per episode 500 views to 1,000 views, depending on the episode and the person that we bring on and how much they promote it across everything, right? And again, I'm using a top of funnel to drive leads to my business, which I think it's working for. It's really hard to track that, but people are like, hey, I watch your podcast, right? So I know that it's working. And again, I know it's making us look like these guys know what they're talking about. What else would you recommend for us to do? Or would there be another level of monetizing that from a different angle?
I always think that there's some way to monetize outside of selling your own products and services. Because if you think about it, the clients you work with, they have a bunch of other products and services that they buy that you yourself probably use, that you know that they love, that you don't have time to make. We can't sell and do everything.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of working with those companies. I like to start off as an affiliate and then become sponsored with that brand.
So like how does that, so like in the dental, and just so I understand this and the listeners understand it, so like again, using dental marketing theory, most of the people who are listening to the show work in the dental industry and have influence over 3 to 10 practices. They want to grow. They're definitely not like, hey, I just want to own one practice. And so who would I go to? Would it be like software companies that wanted to sell to them? Are you thinking, or would it be more like, something else?
It could be software. It could be hardware. You literally have to just ask them. Like go to them and say, okay, when it comes to your audience and people that are tuned in, right, that are listening to your show, you got to ask them what else they personally use, because I love to put surveys in my shows sometimes, like where people can click a link in the description and answer questions. Or when I post about the podcast on social, I tell them, hey, go and fill out this survey. And that's where people will tell you, these are the products that I use. This is a service that I use. This is the software. As far as with you, if they're, they own multiple practices, there's probably some software that they use that they love.
Yeah.
Right. It could be something that they use for hiring. It could be something used for payroll.
Okay.
Right.
So now we get that information. So they love A, B, and C, right? Whatever the A, B, and C is. And then what do I do from there?
And then once you have those companies listed, it'll be about 5. You go and connect with those companies and you start building a relationship with them. So then you can be sponsored by them, hopefully in the long term. But if not in the beginning, start off as an affiliate, just promoting them in exchange for a small commission when people use their software or buy their product. And what this is doing is it helps you build more relevance in the industry. For example, as a podcaster, I help you monetize, right? But I have maybe 20 different companies I work with in terms of software and hardware.
Yeah.
So I can help you with hosting. I can help you with the microphone, with cameras, with everything. Right. So now if you listen to my show and you hear me talk about or recommend these different products and services that you know you need, you have more trust in me because I know the other tools that you need.
Yeah.
Even though I'm not selling them, I know what you need and what you care about.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it too, because sometimes people feel like, okay, the affiliate is kind of slimy, and it doesn't have to be that way. If you go to, I like what you recommended there, is like going and figuring out what people like. It's like doing it the opposite way, right? Not going out and saying, who wants to sponsor my show? Going and saying, what do you guys like? Oh, you guys all like that? Okay, great. I'm going to try to bring them in as sponsors. And then on the early stages, so if someone has 300 views or downloads or whatever, or 500, like what kind of money are you talking about there? Will people actually sponsor there? Or is it more at affiliate level at those amount of viewership?
This is the thing. I've done both across multiple industries for health podcasts and tech and even relationship podcasts. Like you can get sponsored really, really, really early. I mean, before you put an episode out, it all comes down to the relationships that you have with the company. That's why I'm a firm believer in finding a company, connect with them on LinkedIn. You need to know who the owner is.
So give me some numbers, like give me some, not for like you, but like give me like some ranges that people can expect. Is it hundreds of dollars a month? Is it thousands of dollars a month?
So for industries that are more in the entertainment space, it's going to be thousands early on, right? Because it's harder to find good podcasts that create relevant content that are consistent. So if you're doing music, movies, TV shows, pop culture, it's going to be thousands. On the business side, it's going to be hundreds in the beginning because there are a lot of business podcasts now, like marketing and all of that stuff. But when you niche down and you're in a specific industry like tech, or like a lot of religious podcasts, if you're talking about Christianity, like the numbers can go through the roof. So when you niche down, you actually make more. And by thousands,
like how many sponsors can a company, like a newer show like mine, how many, and that's a niche down? Like, are you talking about 5 sponsors? Can you get 3? Do you get 3 sponsors? Like, how do you do that?
You can get between 3 and 5, really. And I say you never want to go more than 5 because you have to plan it out in terms of your content. You don't want the content to be diluted with too many ads. So between 3 and 5, and I would say in the first 6 months, you want to keep it at 1 and 2, right? So you really build your brand. You continue to grow the show and everything. After 6 months is when your show is going to obviously have grown a lot more. That's when things can take off. But in the early stages, I always encourage people to kind of go slower and kind of, get your feet wet a little bit and learn how things work and all of that, figure out the process. Then you'll be ready.
So do you recommend like, I love this, by the way, you're like helping me learn, and I know this is going to help other people really think through this process. So do you recommend people do like the ads, kind of like the Graham Stephan coffee hour show, where he like literally cuts away and he's like, here, I'm selling you this thing, like you guys should go buy it, or that kind of ad? Or are you talking more like product placement, where it's like, hey, I just want to bring this up, I've been using this product and it's amazing, in the conversation? Is there something in between, or do you do both? What are your like expert opinions on that?
What's funny is you will have to do both depending on the companies that you work with. So when you work with smaller brands, you probably had to come up with your own script and run it by them. You probably will have to do it where it's, product placement, where you just mention it throughout the show a couple times. And I encourage people to do product placement when they're only an affiliate. But when you're sponsored with bigger brands, they'll send you a full script, word for word, what you have to say.
Yeah.
They will send you a timestamp.
Don't say these things. They'll tell you what not to say.
Yes. And they have people that do air checks that, come back and make sure you did it properly. The process is more strict and strenuous when you're working with the bigger brands. But I think one thing that you have to do too is kind of prepare for that and like practice it so that you sound good, because brands really appreciate that. It seems insignificant, but they love when you can do a live read and you're like on point and they can tell that you practice it. Like I practice live reads so that it always sounds perfect. And companies literally reach out to me and say, wow, you did an amazing job. Let's work together again.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because if I said, hey, I'm going to put you on stage and you need to talk for 2 hours about podcasting, you could totally do that without a script. If you put me on a stage and said, talk about marketing or talk about dental marketing, I could do that all day long. I do not need a script, and it's going to feel very natural, but that's because I do it all the time. I don't read scripts on selling stuff, and so you really need to nail that down, and that's something I hate doing those, to be honest with you. That's like even the front end of my podcast. My project manager is like, Gary, if you need to film the front ends of your podcast, we'll get more viewers. And they told, all the experts say that you need to do it. And I'm like, I hate doing it because it always sounds so corny of me trying to get the name right and all that kind of stuff. So like hire that out. I that's something that I have a hang up around, but I love that piece of advice. So then from there, if you can get a couple people to come in, monetize the platform, what are your thoughts on people who use podcast as more of like a media center piece, meaning they don't charge you to come on the podcast, but they I've seen people do this, and I've been on shows like this where it's like, hey, I want to be a sponsor of your event or your thing, and they're like, part of that sponsorship that you're buying for your company, you're also going to get a podcast show as well. And they kind of work it in that way. And so it's actually generating revenue from that standpoint. What are your thoughts on that side of it?
I think that's smart. I think more podcasters should monetize in that way, in terms of, I don't think you should charge your guests to be on the show, because there's a lot of legal parts about that are like different and tricky. I work with a podcast lawyer, Gordon Firemark, amazing, the best podcast lawyer in the world. And he explained, we talk about this all the time. There's a lot that goes into when you charge somebody to be on the show. But what you can do is charge somebody for promotion to be on the show. Yeah. So if they want to come on the show and promote their book or their product or something, you can charge them for that. And if they want you to promote to your mailing list on social media, most podcasters should be charging for that, because you put a lot of work into that stuff. So that's a way you could monetize as well. I don't think it's something to lean on long term. I think it's something that should be there as a barrier to separate you from the people that just reach out just give a podcast. Because once you have a podcast, people will reach out to you every day. I get 5 emails a day to be on my show. Yeah, and it's absurd. It's most of the time, truthfully, it's from people that just don't qualify yet, to be honest.
Yeah. I get that all the time too. I'm like, hey, do you know anybody I should put on my show? And I get people on the thing that like doesn't have a bio picture on their Facebook page. You know what I mean? They're like, I want to be on, and I'm like, I don't know how that would work. Have you ever been on a podcast before? Nope. And I'm like, okay, no, it's so
if they don't have, I think having that barrier of charging for promotion really gets the scammers and the selfish people out of there, because they think, wow, well, I have to pay for this, even if it's like $100. They immediately think like, is this worth $100? And then they go on to the next podcast.
So do you go on shows and people you pay to be on, like for the promotion? Do you do that occasionally?
I'm planning that right now for, June and August and stuff, because I have a book coming out, The Business of Podcasting.
Yeah.
So it's part of the marketing strategy. So I think it's worth it. I would pay to be on certain podcasts. I have no problem with doing that.
That's really cool. Okay, I'm going to plug your book in a minute, so we'll definitely get to that, and I won't charge you for it. So you said something interesting there. You said a podcast lawyer. So I've never actually heard of that, and I've never thought about that, but it makes total sense. What is a podcast lawyer, and like why would I need one?
So a podcast lawyer protects you from a lot of the legal parts of podcasting that we literally never think about. And I didn't meet Gordon until my fifth year podcasting.
Wow.
And I didn't realize I was doing a lot of legal stuff for a long time.
Okay, this is good. This is good content right here. So what is the legal stuff that we're all doing on podcasts that we shouldn't be doing?
Number one, big mistake people make is not having a guest release form. Right. So if I come on your show and you put out the episode, I could come back and sue you because you didn't have me sign a release form saying that you were going to post me everywhere on social media and stuff. Like a guest release form is something that you need for most states when you do a podcast interview.
Okay. So my team's like literally jotting all this stuff down. Okay. So number one is release form. So you got to have a release form.
Another one that's really big is like the music you use. So if you use certain intro music, and even if it's commercially licensed, you could still be sued for that. So you have to make sure you get it from a certain platforms are set up properly. Yeah, it's really complicated. It's a massive headache.
Yeah. And if you've ever had somebody come after you for pictures on your website, where they're like, hey, we see you've been using this picture, and you're like, no, I had a web company build it and they got the light. They're like, nope. Let me see the license. And they're like, yeah, you don't have that. They're like, okay, here's the thing. We can sue you and we're going to get $20,000 and we have evidence, or you can give us like $2,000 now. I imagine the music probably is pretty similar to that, right?
The exact same process. Yeah. And another one that people run into a lot is like the rights to their podcast. Meaning if you're on a podcast network or you have a co-host, like the rights to the actual content and the RSS feed is a big deal that people run into all the time.
So like what does that mean? Like what do you mean by that?
So let's say you and I have a podcast and I want to take the show a certain path. You want to go another way.
So we're two separate people, two separate businesses. And we just decide to partner up and say, let's do a podcast together. We'll do like business and podcasting, and I'll focus on the business side. You'll focus on the podcasting side. We do it. It takes off. And then we decide, no, we want to go separate ways.
Yeah. And then there's a fight right there over the RSS feed. Who owns the content? Who gets
old
to keep
content,
the show?
Right?
Yeah. Who gets to keep the audience that we built over the years? Right. And that happens a lot. Like it happens consistently. So having an agreement with your co-host when you start a podcast, it's like the show you said you're starting, with the 18-year-old agency owner, it'll be smart to have a legal agreement in place, for something like that, just in case things go awry. You want to be kind of ready for that. And it's the same thing with being on a podcast network. Who owns the content? How much money do you make?
What's a podcast network? What do you mean by that?
So a podcast network is when a bunch of shows are under one umbrella. Mm-hmm. Really, it's easier to monetize that way. I've been able to sell thousands of dollars of sponsorship deals for multiple shows that weren't launched yet because they were on a network. So that's why networks run a lot. And I just think this is important for people to know, because if you are, as a podcaster, putting out this kind of content, oh my God, you just have to have a legal agreement in place when you work with the podcast networks and be able to read and understand what's on there, because they can own your content and you want to leave. They could be withholding funds from you. You want to make sure your percentage are correct. Basically, if they bring in a sponsor for your show, you might get a smaller percentage. Whereas if you find a sponsor, I literally just work with a podcaster like this. I was trying to get her a sponsorship deal that was 50 times what she had with the network. But in her contract, they wrote it that any sponsorship she gets, they get 50% of it, which is,
just kills the deal, right? It's like,
it was horrifying. So it's a lot of legal procedures that you have to be aware of when it comes to podcasting.
Got it. Okay, that was really good, especially the release form. I didn't have you sign a release form, so we'll have a verbal agreement that that you're not going to sue me or anything. So okay, so let's I want to move to kind of to your business model a little bit. So tell me a little bit about your business. I know you have 3 team members. I know you want to do $120,000 in revenue this next year, and I know you want to launch your book. Like, tell me a little bit about your business model and how that works.
You know, it's so fun that we actually hit the revenue mark already, which
That's
is
awesome,
super
man.
cool.
Congratulations.
Man, I appreciate it. And I'll be honest, this is my first year hitting 6 figures as a business owner.
That's so cool, man. Congratulations.
Right?
Good job.
The first year is always like it's the hardest. And this has been, and I turned 30 in January. So I kind of had it in my mind that this was going to be the year.
Yeah.
And before we hit the halfway mark, we got there like a little earlier. And actually towards the end of April, it happened before I even put the book out or anything. So it was just great to hit that, So our business model is
really quickly before you dive into that. I love what you just said there, that the first year is really, really hard. I think entrepreneurship of all kinds is glorified in America, which is great. Like, start a business. It's awesome. I don't think people really realize how much work actually goes in to starting a business and how you're actually working all the time and you're making nothing and you're building for the future. And so you probably started you're in your 20s, right? So you probably started 5-6 years ago, and it was a grind. And now you're starting to see the fruits of that. And you probably could have went and got a job 3 years ago and made the money you're making now, but you're not living for today and what you're making this year. You're living 5 years down the road, right? And so that's so exciting. I love hearing that. And I love when people win like yourself, especially at the age that you're at, because you have your 30s still. That's where the magic really starts to happen when you start to hit the ground running. And so, yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to make sure that that's a big deal. Like, I really wanted to call that out. So what's your business model? How do you guys make money? How do you help other people? Walk me through that.
Yeah, and this goes into what you said. I call it the earning stage, where you're as an entrepreneur, when you're trying to just figure things out, you kind of have to earn your way to success. And I tried so many business models, selling courses and doing coaching. I even tried the bigger services. So now we do a hybrid of all of it. Right. But the fun part is I've automated the courses, right, to where that just sells. It works on its own. So I don't have to be stressed about it as much.
So what is your course about? Like, what's the topic?
First, I have an absurd amount of course content, like, because I've been recording since 2015. As soon as I started podcasting,
so you just started making courses of how to do stuff.
And I kept all of it. So I have like over 500 hours. It's absurd.
Wow. So what's your best-selling course?
My best-selling course it would have to be the podcast Cash Flow Blueprint.
Okay.
Where I go through monetizing from the bottom to the top, whether it's getting sponsored, being an affiliate, selling products.
How much is that? Like, how much does that cost?
That one is only $500.
Okay.
Like,
how many do you think you'll sell this year of that one?
Oh man, PodFX is literally tomorrow. So
yeah, so it might blow up.
Yeah, it always does, man.
Okay. So when you go and do a show like that, those take off because you already know it works, right? So so a good event. Just tell me what a good, like, you're going to speak tomorrow. How many of those are you going to sell, like, just from that one event?
Well, because I have it bundled with the book, and then I have a workbook, and I have a bunch of stuff, I probably will sell about 50 put together. So I have like
That's
a 70% off deal going. Yeah, and I set it up because I've done maybe over 60 speaking engagements now in the past like 3 years. So I have a system now where when I go and speak, I have a whole sales process set up, a
so
sales
you're driving
page and everything.
everybody towards that. Yeah, that's really smart because I have some people, I'm talking with some people and different people launching courses, and some people are struggling through that. So when you first started, obviously you probably failed a lot of times to get to, hey, I do this one event and I make $25,000. Walk me through some of the failures that you started with as far as courses went and how you got to that blueprint that really worked well.
Oh man, I used to try to use Twitter a lot. And Twitter actually eventually worked, but I used it wrong for the first three courses I put out, I used it wrong. I just talked about it after it was done and everything. And I tried to run sales like, oh, if you don't buy it now, then it's all going to go away. And I realized that nobody was really paying attention. They didn't care. So one of the things that I did is I started talking to people and have them build the product with me. Mm-hmm. So all that time I spent talking to people for free, I just said, hey, look, I want to talk to 10 people in the next 3 weeks for 30 minutes and just ask you some questions about your podcast journey. And all I would do is take all the data I would ask everybody the same question and record it. And I would take all of that information and go and make the course on that. I would circle back to those same people, sell them the course 50% off, and then interview them again after they go through the course. And I would even add that as course content for a bonus as well. So, and the funniest part is I even use my podcast to do that, because at a certain point, I was thinking
you can tell I'm doing it, right? I'm sitting here like, okay, tell me how to fix my podcast, right?
Exactly.
It's smart, yeah.
Because it works so well in so many ways. And then I switched it again. I said, why have this podcast if I'm not going to use this podcast to generate leads for the courses that I'm selling? So that's when I tried something new. I said, okay, I'm going to do a content blitz. I put out an episode every day for a week straight. And this course I had was about $200. And I said, I'm going to keep it at 200. I just want to see how many I could sell. And I put out an episode every day for 5 days straight. And it was all like myself talking to the audience, training content.
So were you teasing
every
course?
episode?
So every episode, for 20 minutes to 15 minutes, or what was it?
Yep. 15 to 20 minutes every episode. And I kind of made it like a masterclass and then broke it down to release. And I made like a little over 12 grand in that 1 week.
So that felt good, right? So you were probably making hundreds before, right? Or maybe thousands before. And now, so now it's blown up. So you're like, okay, I got the formula now. So then, so what was the next step after that you went from, okay, I made 12 grand this week. How'd you go back to that well and keep pumping it?
Well, I realized that it's not something you want to do like every single week, obviously. So now it's something that I do, once a quarter. And now I even use that same strategy of packaging things together and creating bundles. I put that onto the podcast at times where I will literally record my own ad for the show sometimes. But I never try to sell like, hey, go and buy this and get all of this stuff.
Yeah.
I like to present it as, you have this problem, I have this solution. Here's the first step to the solution. And I give that away for free. And when they go and get that, they go and schedule a call and they usually buy. So I don't really necessarily sell on the podcast. I'm not like, hey, this is going to cost you $1,000.
Yeah.
I
like the way you actually said on one of your podcasts, you were like, hey, I help people monetize their podcast. If you're not into that, then, you can stop listening now. And it's like, because you already know like 99.9% of people out there don't make anything from their podcast, right? So you're just like, cool, I'm going to just niche down and then I'm going to hammer. This is what I do. And you have a lot of great, this has been so good and I've really, really enjoyed it. Anything that I forgot to ask you about that you feel like, I want to touch on your book. What's your book? When does it come out? How much is it? How can people find it?
So the Business of Podcasting is releasing on June 1st. Man, I'm super excited to just have this book out to actually help podcasters monetize. And this book is for any podcaster that wants to make money. Whether you have a business or not, whether you have a company or not, if you have one employee that's just your best friend, I don't care. I can help you monetize your show no matter what level you're on. I've done this with a ton of shows. And throughout the book, I give you all the processes. The workbook that comes with the book even has templates for emails to work with sponsors and stuff. Like all of that is in there. So you can get the book. It's only $17. It'll be on my website, getthebusinessofpodcasting.com. And we even have the
ultimate. It's out now. It's out right now.
Yeah, it's out now. Okay. And we even have like the ultimate bundle where I'm putting all of my courses, all of my content in there, everything I've done over the past 7 years to make sure you can make money beyond the microphone as well. Like I said, I use public speaking and I do a lot of different things to that really stem from my podcast to help me make money consistently. And I think that podcasting is a first pillar to it all, and it leads to you doing everything else that you want to do.
That's awesome, man. I'm going to buy a couple of them, okay? And I just made a note on my to-do to make sure I do that to support you. I love what you're doing. Any questions that I forgot to ask you that I should ask you?
No, man. I actually want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
So if you could have any superpower in the world, what would it be? The superpower that you want?
Superpower that I want? Either infinity money glitch or invincibility. I always go back and forth on those.
Top two for sure. That and like time travel or something.
Time travel would be cool. I'd probably end up like bending the universe and like breaking a bunch of stuff with time travel. So I've thought about that one. You know, you can mess some things up if you time travel. I watched too many movies on that.
All right.
How about you? What's your superpower?
For me, it will definitely be. I've heard different explanations about flight and stuff like that, and like why it would be bad.
Yeah.
So, in time travel, like you said, ruining things is definitely something I don't want to do. Like I thought about that too, and all of them have a downside.
They do. Like even invincibility. It's like, do I really want to live 1,000? Like at 1,000 years, I'm going to be like, okay, this is. All right, this is boring. Round 5 of this, you know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, that'd be interesting.
I would say for me, it's teleportation, being able to go from one place to the next with ease.
Actually, I might change mine to that. That would actually help me a lot.
Yeah. As a business owner, I'm always thinking like, man, this would be great. Like
I'd just be happy with a jet. Just a jet, you know what I mean? Just a private jet. Last question. So honest feedback, because I'm going to ask you off air too. Well, number one, you said I get to come on your podcast, right? So I just want to get it on recording. All right, cool.
Sure.
And then number two, how did I do today? Like, what would you do better today? Like, what could I have done better? What could my team have done better? And I want your constructive criticism. Like, you're the podcast expert. This is a new podcast. I'm learning. I want to learn.
No, I think it was like almost perfect. It's really good the way you ask questions and how we can stay on one subject and go layers deep into it. I think that's really, really good for the content. Not a lot of interviewers do that. So I think what you do really good already is tying the first question into the third question. I don't think many people can do that to where it's like a trail for the conversation and it's consistent, because oftentimes what will happen is we go from one subject to the next without ever really finishing the first one. Yeah. So you did a really good job of subject finish all the way through. I think that was perfect, man. I don't really see too many holes in this, man. It seems like you've been doing it for a while, man.
Let's go. All right, cool. Well, I'm going to ask you off air. I want some constructive criticism. I want to get better. I'm always trying to figure out. I listen to other people's shows and I'm like, why do I listen to this? Why do they got me engaged? I think the biggest thing is the conversational part that you mentioned up front. When you get really good at just having a conversation and being curious of like, wait, why do you do that? How do you make that better? Wait, what do you mean by that? When you do that, it makes everything better. When you're just reading a list of questions, I had a whole list of questions to ask you. I literally didn't ask any of them because it was like, we just went down one subject. So I love when podcasts go that way. I don't have to really think and I'm just learning the whole time. So great job today. If you guys don't know Chris, please follow him. Please check him out. How can people connect with you? I know, share your website and then some of your social media as well.
My personal website, thecoachchris.com, got a lot of information there. If you have any questions about anything, man, just follow me on Twitter at @thecoachchris_ or Instagram at @thecoachchris_. I don't post a ton of content like I used to, but I'm there talking to people all the time. So please just send me, if you have a podcast, send it to me. I love listening to shows.
Let's go. Awesome, man. Thanks so much for coming on.